Namaskar and welcome to World Today. Well, India and Australia will be conducting a ministerial level 2+2 dialogue tomorrow in New Delhi. The format, where the defense and the foreign ministers jointly deliberate on common strategic interests, is one that India has adopted now with Japan and the United States, and these are both Quad members as well. So we'll be putting all this into context, but first, let's look at the headlines. India and Australia to hold 2+2 dialogue at the ministerial level, both sides looking to ramp up overall defense and security ties and boost strategic cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh holds delegation level talks with his Australian counterpart, Peter Dutton. The first civilian flight from Afghanistan since the evacuation reaches Qatar with 113 passengers on board. The U.S. hopes that there would be more such opportunities for U.S. citizens and others to leave Afghanistan. The world remembers the September 11 attacks as 20 years passed since the horrific terror attacks. India's permanent representative to the United Nations, T.S. Tirumurti, tells the Security Council that the situation in Afghanistan is a matter of direct concern for India, as India is an immediate neighbor and a friend. Tirumurti describes the situation as very fragile. Denmark shows interest in setting up an energy island in the Gulf of Mannar with potential to generate 4 gigawatts to 10 gigawatts of electricity. The Danish minister says that the green partnership, it's a strategic partnership between the two countries, will help in achieving clean energy targets. And the BCCI, along with the England and Wales Cricket Board, have jointly decided to call off the 5th cricket test between India and England at Manchester in the ongoing series. Well, the BCCI has offered the ECB a rescheduling of the cancelled test match. So those were the headlines. Let's begin with the big news. And let's go straight to the big news. Well, the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh held delegation-level talks with his Australian counterpart, the Defence Minister of Australia, Peter Dutton. This happened Friday afternoon, and the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said that India is committed to building a robust partnership with Australia for the security and growth of the entire region. He said that during a joint statement following the bilateral meeting with his Australian counterpart, Peter Dutton, he said all this. Let's listen.
हम दोनों इंडिया ऑस्ट्रेलिया कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप की सभी संभावनाओं को साकार करने के लिए संयुक्त रूप से कार्य करने के लिए उत्सुक हैं। यह पार्टनरशिप फ्री, ओपन, इंक्लूसिव और रूल बेस्ड इंडो पैसिफिक रीजन के हमारे शेयर्ड विजन पर आधारित है। ऑस्ट्रेलिया और भारत दोनों के इस क्षेत्र में शांति, विकास और व्यापार के फ्री फ्लो, रूल्स बेस्ड ऑर्डर तथा आर्थिक विकास करने में महत्वपूर्ण हित है।
And earlier in the day, the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh held delegation-level talks with his Australian counterpart, Peter Dutton. And Friday afternoon, he said that India is committed to building a robust partnership with Australia for the security and growth of the entire region, as we heard.
I take this opportunity to congratulate you on your appointment as the Minister of Defence of Australia. I am certain that under your leadership, the Australian Defence Establishment will carry forward the engagement with the Ministry of Defence of India. Excellency, I am happy to note the significant progress of our bilateral relations in recent times. The elevation of this relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership during the virtual leaders summit between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Morrison in June 2020 was a major milestone in the relationship. Despite these testing times of COVID, your visit to India is a testimony of our strong friendship. Excellency, India and Australia have a very comfortable and natural relationship anchored in shared democratic traditions, commonality of institutions of governance, rule of law, love for cricket and hockey. Our two countries have shared stakes in a peaceful, cooperative and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. Excellency, as I had mentioned to you during our telephone call on 1st June 2021, India has witnessed a severe COVID second wave. The large number of infections had strained our medical resources, and we are making all efforts to reinforce our capacity, and I am deeply appreciative of Australia's efforts in supporting India in this time of crisis. Your efforts to assist India with ventilators, oxygen concentrators, and other critical medical supplies have been timely.
Well, India and Australia will focus extensively on further ramping up the overall defense and security ties and also boosting strategic cooperation in the Indo-Pacific at the inaugural 2+2 ministerial dialogue to be held tomorrow in New Delhi. The External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, and the Defense Minister, Rajnath Singh, are scheduled to hold this dialogue with the Australian Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, and the Defense Minister, Peter Dutton of Australia. Australia's Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, and the Defense Minister, Peter Dutton, are in India. They arrived today ahead of the 2+2 ministerial dialogue. And on the other hand, the Australian Defence Minister has said that India's leadership is essential in the Australia Indo-Pacific strategy.
India's leadership is central to Australia's Indo-Pacific strategy. It is in the sovereign interests of us both to align our strategy, our capability and our resources. And so today we have continued to work towards enhancing Australia's posture in the Indian Ocean region by ramping up our Air Force cooperation, our maritime engagement and exercises.
And joining us now is Anil Wadhwa, former senior diplomat. Thank you very much, Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, for joining us. So we have to try and put into context this 2+2 dialogue. We know that India and the US has a 2+2 dialogue. India has also had one such dialogue with Japan, and we've had with Australia at at the secretary level quite a few such meetings. But this is the first time at the ministerial level. So what would you think? I mean, first of all, this looks like the Quad seems to be having 2+2 dialogues amongst themselves.
This 2+2 dialogue is a direct result of the decision which was taken last year, the virtual summit between the two prime ministers. And this is a dialogue whose time has come. As you rightly said, we have a 2+ dialogue with the United States and Japan. One with Russia is on the anvil as well.
Yes.
Important that when we talk about issues which face us, we are talking about both foreign policy and defense together, because it's a comprehensive picture between two countries who have a strategic cooperation in many areas now. Australia is one such country with which India has a bilaterally very comprehensive and exclusive relationship in a number of areas. And if we have to take forward the concept of free and open Indo-Pacific, we have to take into account not just the foreign policy issues,
Yes.
but also what is happening in terms of security for the two countries.
Indeed. So we're looking at the Indo-Pacific specifically, but India and Australia could develop a stronger relationship on economic and trade as well, because you see what's happened is that the Australians are very dependent on China in this realm, and India is a potential substitute in a sense, in the global value chains, as there's a paradigm shift taking place. So these are areas that can strengthen the relationship between the two countries.
Absolutely. I think it's very important that India and Australia diversify their trade and investment relationship. And there is a big potential for doing that in the future. Currently, the two sides are engaged in a bilateral CETA, negotiations for which have been resumed after they were put on the back burner due to the RCEP negotiations.
Yes.
And currently, we also are discussing with Australia and Japan the Resilient Supply Chains Initiative, which will focus on few selected areas on which the countries concerned do not want to depend on one particular country going forward. So therefore, there is a big potential in the economic relationship between India and Australia. There are new areas of cooperation which have opened up, and both countries see themselves as complementary economies in that respect.
Right.
Trade and investment has traditionally done well over the past few years, but we need to ramp up much more in terms of infrastructure and especially the e-mobility program and the issues which face India as it goes forward economically.
So the issues that are, a challenge to the Indo-Pacific, to free and open Indo-Pacific, is really China's Belt and Road Initiative, as well as, and now China's expansionist designs with, even on the land route, with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which now with the Taliban government in Afghanistan, they are also interested in that. So would you see, the Quad looking at the developments recently in Afghanistan as a trigger, to certain conditions that perhaps could arise due to China's policies?
But certainly, Afghanistan and the situation there with the takeover of the Taliban have opened up a lot of situations which were not
Yes.
foreseen earlier. And I'm sure the Quad countries, when they meet in a summit, which is expected later this year, will obviously discuss the issues which are arising out of the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan. Immediately, however, as far as India is concerned, this causes a serious concern due to the possibility of terrorism, which could arise out of Afghanistan due to the involvement of Pakistan and the ISI. Now, of course, the Quad countries, all four of them, are very much concerned about terrorism, and not just in the region, but around the world. And therefore, they would be putting their minds together as to what happens in the future and how this possibility could be countered. Bilaterally, India and Australia have always supported each other's initiatives as far as the aspect of terrorism around the world is concerned. Australia was involved in Afghanistan militarily, as you know. And now that there's been a withdrawal of the United States and other foreign forces from Afghanistan, the field is open for a number of possibilities which both countries would like to avoid.
Indeed, if we look at the method of the 2+2 dialogue itself, what theoretically does it hope to achieve by combining both the defense and the external affairs aspects?
So I think the focus for the cooperation in defense and security, as well as foreign policy, talking about the issues together, is obviously to have a coordinated approach in how you approach the problems of the region, of the world in general, and of course the issues which face both India and Australia. In our immediate neighborhood, you have the aggressive policies arising out of the Chinese policies in South China Sea and the Western Pacific, and Australia is most concerned about that. India is concerned about what's happening in the Indian Ocean. Of course, India is also concerned of the CPEC, etc.
Right.
So therefore, a coordinated approach is always very useful. Taking the same view on issues, exchanging views about the possibilities going forward, and overall cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. Don't forget that we have a very important logistic support agreement which was signed between India and Australia last year.
Yes.
And the fact that the two sides today have also taken a decision to have the second leg of the Malabar exercises from the 11th to the 14th of October, after the first phase, which was held off Guam on 26th to 29th August, bodes well for the future. This will provide for more understanding of each other in a quad format where all four navies will be exercising together. And today, another very important decision which has been taken is to make sure that the air force of the two countries can exercise together in the future.
So the military logistics support agreement, these are significant agreements in terms of in the countries working with their armed forces working together. You did mention about the exercises as well. Is this just patrolling of the region so that the sea lanes are remain free? Or what is it actually, or to try and enforce a rules-based order? What is the ultimate aim?
So the immediate aim is to understand each other better and to make sure that there is interoperability which is perfected going forward if there is a situation which arises in the future. Now, we must not forget that Quad is not a military alliance.
Okay.
And therefore, what is important in terms of the Quad is a signal which will ensure that the Indo-Pacific will remain free and open, and that we are not an aggressive alliance which is actually going to go into the fighting mode in the naval sphere. But the fact that the four navies exercise together, that they understand each other itself is a very important step in order to ensure that the sea lanes of communication, like you said, remain open and countries remain within the realms of the rule of law.
If you look at from the external affairs point of view, we've discussed a little bit of defense because today the bilateral meeting has taken place. Does the external affairs or the foreign affairs segment play a sort of how does it contribute to the overall strategic partnership? Is it more with the economic agenda, the cultural and the other aspects which can also add more weight to the overall partnership, people to people exchanges? These are other aspects that are looked beyond the defense sphere?
Absolutely. So there is a lot of meat in the relationship beyond the defense sphere. When we talk about the defense sphere, we essentially talk about maritime security and how to strengthen that. And we just discussed the aspect of our exercises, which are done bilaterally as well as in the Quad context. But if you talk about the relationship as a whole, the trade and investment side is extremely important going forward. The supply chains resilience initiative is very important. And also we have an initiative in the distribution of vaccines for the Indo-Pacific region. If you recall the last virtual summit,
yes,
the Quad had taken a decision for manufacturing of vaccines in India with financing from the United States and Japan, and Australia took over the mantle of distribution and logistics for the Indo-Pacific. And this discussion, I'm sure, will be taken forward during this 2+2 dialogue as well. Also, looking at the challenges which have arisen in the region and the fact that Foreign Minister Marie Spain is going to visit countries like South Korea, Indonesia, United States in the same length of her tour to India, means that there is a desire on the part of Australia to ensure that some amount of policy coordination is done with regard to democracies who believe in the rule of law in the region. And therefore, regional issues of the geopolitical issues will be the primary concern.
Indeed. So we do know that, Quad is one of the underlying themes is to strengthen democracies as well, because they are, after all, four democracies. And as a means of government, do you feel that democracies are under threat because of what's happened in Afghanistan, or is there an important message that needs to go out that democracy is perhaps the most stable form of government, or the most inclusive form of government that the world needs to recognize? And maybe when certain powers of a considerable strength, when they combine, assert this, then perhaps the world order accepts it.
Well, I think democracy is certainly important, but more than democracy, it's a rule of law which must prevail in the region and the world in general. And in this case, I think taking Afghanistan as an example would be not completely correct, because Afghanistan, what has happened there is an aberration.
Okay.
And that's going forward, other countries would not like to be repeated. So therefore, Afghanistan holds a lesson for everyone who believes in the rule of law.
Right.
And democracy is one way of making sure that the world order as it exists and the rule of law as it exists is preserved.
Indeed, when we look at a defense relationship, often it's the things that come to mind are the exchange of agreements on armaments and things like that, because it's basically looking for a buyer kind of, or a buyer-seller kind of relationship. But that's not quite the case here, isn't it? I mean, it's a strategic relationship looking at common interests in exercising the rule of law. So does that, change the way one looks at a defense relationship?
So I think in the case of India and Australia specifically, and the Quad, if you take the four countries together, it's a relationship which is mutually reinforcing. Now, you yourself mentioned that the Quad countries have signed logistics agreements with each other.
Yes.
That's essentially because it is much better, and it is better for all the Quad countries, and indeed India and Australia, to work together on issues that they believe in. Now, in this case, the Indo-Pacific theater and the Indian Ocean in general, and to the west of India, the Arabian Sea as well, is becoming a theater of contention between many countries. There is aggressiveness on the part of China, and going forward, India and Australia see what can happen unless they work together in this respect. So therefore, a convergence of foreign policy interests
Right.
and defense interests is very important. That's the significance of the 2+2 dialogue.
What would you see as the role of ASEAN and other groupings which also operate within the same region?
So both India and Australia, and the Quad in particular, have said that the ASEAN centrality is extremely important. The ASEAN vision of the Indo-Pacific is similar to what has been pronounced by the Quad countries. And both India and Australia work very closely with ASEAN. Without ASEAN support and mutual reinforcement, the policies that both countries adopt in the region would meet with resistance. And therefore, that relationship is again extremely important. Indonesia is a particularly important country, and on the Strip, for example, Marie Spain has paid special attention and has passed by Indonesia as well because of this very reason. Again, there are very important countries in the region like Vietnam, Philippines, and others who have faced the brunt of the Chinese aggression. The cooperative relationship between India and Australia in the context of the East Asia Summit, where they work together with the ASEAN, has been strengthened a lot over the last few years. And going forward, I think both countries will work a lot with them, especially in the vaccine distribution field, which will, strengthen more the ties which already exist. And of course, both countries are also looking at strengthening their defense cooperation and the maritime security aspect with the ASEAN countries.
Is it, I mean, we're looking at a post-COVID world, and would you think that COVID, which people are not too sure about the origins of COVID still, whether, it had certain other motives as the virus spread across the world. In this context, how important is a relationship in trying to, build defense structures to this kind of a biological infusion, if you want, for a better word, into the areas of subversion?
So I think it's very important to work together in the field of biotechnology and to prepare countries for future pandemics as well. just like HADR became very important following the tsunami in 2004, and India and Australia and Japan, the United States worked together in that context. And that's again the reason why the Quad came together in the first place. And in this situation, the post-COVID world, it's extremely important if once again the Quad helps out,
Right.
especially in the Indo-Pacific region, and ensures that there is some amount of resilience and an infrastructure which is created, of course, working along with WHO and the world bodies to make sure that the region does not suffer due to the incursion, as you said, of future viruses, and is better prepared to deal with pandemics, uh, making sure, therefore, in the process that their economies do not suffer.
Quad, as we know, was an idea that started out in the early 2000s, but then it was Australia that backed out under, Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, because he wanted to be closer to China, and he felt that this was not working. Would you see, the differences or shades of opinion which are different in Australia that could change based on, the political mood?
So yes, of course, like you rightly pointed out, I think Australia at that point was not very keen to take this forward since it was being opposed by China at that point in time. The Australian economy and the Chinese economy was very closely interlinked due to the commodity trade, which Australia was benefiting from at that point in time. And come to think of it, I think Japanese economy and the Chinese economy is also very closely interlinked even till today. The India-China trade is also
Yes.
quite a substantial amount. We cannot ignore that. But the fact remains that the geopolitics has changed and the situation has changed. And I go back to my earlier statement that this has happened because of the change in attitude of the Chinese state. And because of the aggressive nature of the policies which are being followed in the South China Sea, in the East China Sea, in the Western Pacific, and of course in the Indian Ocean, that all the Quad countries together, India and Australia in particular, are facing an aggressive China, and therefore the mood in these countries has changed to one of collaboration with each other in order to hedge what can happen to them in the political field as well as in the economic field.
Right.
So therefore, in this situation, you obviously have to overlook the economic benefits and look more for your security and your well-being going forward for the sake of your people. And that
Well,
is what is
true.
exactly
A final word, on the cultural linkages between India and Australia, and of course, the defense minister today mentioned about the two sporting events, which are, hockey and cricket, which are greatly loved in both countries. So, how important is it to refer to these things to build sort of trust between the two countries?
So these are very important linkages. Of course, cricket is between India and Australia is always followed with great interest by a number of enthusiasts in both countries. Hockey recently has also become an extremely important sport between the two countries. And I think going forward, there will be a lot of collaboration as far as sports management, sports medicine, and stadium management is concerned, because Australia sees a lot of scope for
Yes.
working in these fields. Don't forget that we have now close to 700,000 Indian diaspora in Australia, 90,000 Indian students who study in Australia, and before the pandemic, it was close to 120,000. So we have a linkage which is getting strengthened year after year. And before the pandemic, we had an upswing in our tourists who are going to Australia as well. And I'm sure once the pandemic dies down, that we'll see a revival of those kind of linkages. Indian food is getting more popular in Australia.
Sure.
And of course, the Diwali and other festivals are now celebrated in major cities in Australia with great show.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, for those detailed inputs that you gave us and helped us put in context tomorrow's 2+2 meeting between India and Australia. Let's move on to our next story. The first civilian flight from Afghanistan since the evacuation arrived in Qatar. It had about 113 passengers on board, and they were subsequently bound for other places like the United States, Britain, Canada, and some other countries. And the U.S. now is expecting more such opportunities for U.S. citizens and others to leave Afghanistan. The September 11, which is tomorrow, it marks 20 years since the horrific terror attacks that, as we know, were linked to the Al-Qaeda, which was based in Afghanistan. Here's an update now on the situation in Afghanistan today. Major relief for these passengers. They are thanking their stars today. These are the visuals of the first international commercial flight since the end of last month's chaotic Western airlift from Afghanistan. This flight arrived in Qatar's capital Doha on Thursday. About 113 passengers were on board, including US, Canadian, Ukrainian, German and British citizens. Passengers were reportedly taken to Kabul airport in a Qatari convoy after safe passage was agreed. Upon arrival in Doha, they were initially made to stay in a compound hosting Afghan and other evacuees.
I am feeling a bit lighter, easier, because I was extremely heavy in the morning when I had to make a tough decision to leave my family behind. I would have stayed more with them, but I was thinking maybe this is the last flight, as we were told before September 11, and I fear that there might be no flights for a while. I keep calling other flights. They said we don't know if there's any other flights soon. So I had to make a decision quick when I got the email in the morning. My son is in Canada, so he was really pushing me to leave. Unfortunately, I had to leave my mother, sisters, brothers in Kabul. They were sleeping, and I didn't tell them. I just left, and I called them from the airport.
The U.S. State Department welcomed the first civilian flight carrying U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents and others from Kabul to Doha. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken had urged help from his Qatari counterpart with evacuations during a recent visit to Qatar.
That we have been in regular contact with American citizens and others to whom we have a special responsibility in Afghanistan, both before the end of the U.S. government-led evacuation effort and after. And so as part of that, we invited more than 30 American citizens and LPRs to be on this flight. Now, not all of them ultimately chose to depart Afghanistan. We certainly hope and we certainly expect there will be additional opportunities for Americans and others to whom we have that commitment to depart Afghanistan if they so choose, using this and potentially other means as well.
U.S. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab also expressed gratitude to Qatar for facilitating a flight carrying 13 British nationals from Kabul to safety in Doha. He also expressed hope that the Taliban will keep their commitment to allow safe passage for those who want to leave. The Taliban-led government has definitely not kept their promises. Afghan staff of the United Nations say they are being increasingly subjected to harassment and intimidation since the Taliban came to power last month.
We are, however, increasingly worried by the growing number of incidents of harassment and intimidation against our national staff. We will continue to do everything possible to support our staff and keep them from harm's way. The UN cannot conduct its work that is so essential to the Afghan people, if its personnel are subjected to intimidation, fear for their lives, and cannot move freely.
We are outraged at reports that members of the Taliban have engaged in reprisals against UN staff throughout the country. This is simply unacceptable. We call on Taliban leadership to ensure Taliban members at all levels comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law and take every action to respect the operational independence and neutrality of the UN and its international and national staff.
Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala Yousafzai has also urged the United Nations Security Council to recognize girls' education a powerful tool for building peace and security. She even asked the Council to protect Afghan women and girls.
I urge the leaders at Monday's Emergency Aid Conference to agree to a generous financing package to ensure all Afghan children can return to school as soon as possible. Finally, the UN presence in every region of Afghanistan is needed more than ever. To do this, a strengthened mandate and resources for the UN assistance mission and other UN agencies in Afghanistan are essential. Mr. President, A united Security Council speaking with one voice for girls' education can compel the Taliban to make real concessions. This is vital not only for Afghan women and girls themselves, but for long-term security in the region and our world.
The United Nations has warned that the freezing of billions of dollars in Afghan assets to keep them out of Taliban hands would inevitably spark a severe economic downturn. The body said doing so would push millions more Afghans into poverty and hunger.
If a new Afghan government upholds its commitments and obligations, brings greater stability to the country and region, demonstrates real inclusion, and protects the gains of the past 2 decades, we'll work with it. But we will not do that on the basis of trust or faith alone. The Taliban seeks international legitimacy and support. Our message is simple. Any legitimacy and support will have to be earned.
Afghanistan's UN ambassador, who was appointed by the US-backed government, urged the Security Council to withhold any recognition of any government in Afghanistan unless it's truly inclusive and formed on the basis of free will of the people.
This body, on multiple occasions, committed not to recognize an exclusionary government nor to support the re-establishment of the Islamic Emirate as stipulated in the Security Council Resolution 2513. The Afghan people expect you to keep this promise and pressure the Taliban to pave the way for an inclusive government that all segments of our society can accept and feel a part of. The people's protest in the past few days is a strong message to the Taliban that Afghans of all backgrounds and creeds will not accept a totalitarian system imposed upon them. They demand their freedom and want to have a say in shaping the future destiny of their country. I therefore ask you to withhold any recognition of any government in Afghanistan unless it's truly inclusive and formed on the basis of free will of the people.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council paid homage to Ground Zero to mark the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks. The Indian envoy to the United Nations, Ambassador T.S. Tirumurthy, in a tweet said, the UNSC paid homage at the September 11 memorial in New York to lives lost, including many Indians. He further said, there are no your terrorists and my terrorists or bad terrorists and good terrorists. Must fight it together. World Today Desk, DD India. And speaking at the UNSC debate on Afghanistan, India's permanent representative T.S. Tirumurthy said that the situation is a matter of direct concern for India as an immediate neighbor and a friend. Describing the current situation there, Tirumurthy said that Afghanistan continues to be very fragile.
The situation in Afghanistan continues to be very fragile. As its immediate neighbor and friend to its people, the current situation is of direct concern to us. Uncertainties abound about the future of the Afghan people, as well as about sustaining and building on the gains achieved over the last 2 decades. In this context, we reiterate the need for the voices of Afghan women to be heard, aspirations of Afghan children to be realized, and the rights of minorities to be protected. We call on humanitarian assistance to be provided urgently and underline the need to provide unhindered access to UN and other agencies in this regard.
Ambassador Tirumurthy also called on the international community to come together and stand with the people of Afghanistan in their desire for peace and stability and also for security.
Afghanistan has already seen enough bloodshed and violence in recent years. We call on the international community to come together, rising above any partisan interest, to stand together with the people of Afghanistan in their desire for peace, stability, and security in the country. We need to enable all Afghans, including women, children, and minorities, to live in peace and dignity.
And now a story from Hyderabad. Though drones have been used for photography, for mapping, for other operations, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has widened the scope of drone use. And Telangana will soon become the first state in the country to use drone technology for delivering medicines and medical samples. So the advancements in aerial technology also recently notified new drone rules. These are set to bring in a new phase in the health sector. The Telangana government initiated a new project called Medicines from Skies. Take a look at this report.
Telangana government has initiated a novel project named Medicines from Skies to deliver medicines, medical samples and vaccines through skies with the help of drones. It has identified Vikarabad, a district headquarter, which is nearly 50 kilometers away from Hyderabad, to launch a pilot study for implementing this project. The government has tied up with a Delhi-based startup company named Sky Air Mobility for implementing this project. As part of it, the trial runs have begun in Vikarabad on a successful note. District Collector Nikhila, District SP Mr. Narayana and other stakeholders in the project has witnessed the trial run. The trial run involved beyond visual line of sight drones fly at a height of 140 meters, for which Airports Authority of India has given permission. The project will be launched by Civil Aviation Minister Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia and Telangana IT Minister Mr. K.T. Ramarao on September 11th. Talking to DD News, Dr. Suresh Muniswamy from Indian Institute of Public Health said that drones help to carry emergency medicines to primary health centers in remote areas. The medicines can be stored in the drones as per required temperatures.
Present drone can carry 16 kgs, but again we are developing drones that can carry 32 kgs, 64 kgs and possibly even double that. And at that payload capacity, you can even carry a human being and act as an air ambulance. So this is only the beginning, and as we go forward, more and more advances will possibly happen and we will be able to serve the entire medical needs of this country.
While the nation's focus is on administering vaccines to the entire population at the earliest, the drone technology is expected to speed up vaccination drive in the country in the coming days. With Narinder, Suprashanti, Bureau Report, Doordarshan News, Hyderabad.
Well, India has achieved a 100 gigawatt mark of installed renewable energy capacity recently, and global investors have shown interest in India's green economy, and that continues unabated in the backdrop of the growing demand for electricity. So the government is trying to explore new avenues for energy sources and achieve a target of 450 gigawatts by 2030. Now, the Danish Minister for Energy met our Renewable Energy Minister, R.K. Singh, and they looked at collaboration opportunities between the two countries in the renewable energy sector.
India is diversifying its renewable energy basket to keep up with the ambitious target of 450 gigawatt by 2030. Denmark, which is arguably one of the most advanced countries in developing offshore wind energy, has shown interest in Indian renewable sector. Danish Energy Minister Dan Jannik Jorgensen met Power Minister R.K. Singh today to discuss the areas of Indo-Danish collaboration in the renewable energy sector.
In offshore wind, the PLF is very high, the plant load factor is very high, and ultimately it's a very steady power, it's a clean power, it's steady power. Therefore, we have been working on offshore wind. We have surveyed sites, potential sites of the shores of Tamil Nadu and Gujarat, and they have high potential. So hopefully we'll come out with bids for offshore wind very soon.
India is also trying to lead in green energy transition with hydrogen as fuel. Government is all set to launch world's biggest bid in green hydrogen in few months from now.
We both have interests in green hydrogen. So I told him about our projects, and I invited him. I said that we'll be coming out with bids for electrolyzer capacity and huge bids, that's about 10,000 megawatts. And we are also going to come out with bids for green hydrogen. And I told him that I think these bids should come out in the next 5-6 months, less than that. In 4 or 5 months it should come out. And these will be the biggest bids in the world.
Denmark has also shown interest in the setting up of an energy island in the Gulf of Mannar with the potential to generate 4 gigawatt to 10 gigawatt of electricity. The Danish minister said that the green strategic partnership between the two countries will help in achieving clean energy targets.
We've decided to work very actively on getting Danish investments to India in offshore wind. which will be, I think, very important for India because you have very ambitious targets on this. You are a world leader in the targets you have. And we have some know-how because we have done this in decades in Denmark. We were the first country in the world to make an offshore wind farm. But now, because of the development in the technology, actually offshore wind can be cheaper than coal.
India and Denmark had agreed last year to elevate bilateral relations to a green strategic partnership to advance political cooperation, expand economic relations and green growth and create job opportunities. This also aims to strengthen cooperation on addressing global challenges with focus on Paris Agreement and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Abhishek Jha, DD News.
Let's get you some more news now from across the world. Here's news at a glance.
US President Joe Biden spoke with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping today. Both the leaders had a broad strategic discussion in which they discussed areas where their interests converge and areas where their interests, values and perspectives diverge. Biden and Jinping have agreed to engage on both sets of issues openly and straightforwardly. Biden said that the discussion was part of the United States' ongoing effort to responsibly manage the competition between the US and the People's Republic of China. Biden even underscored the US's enduring interest in peace, stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and the world, and the two leaders discussed the responsibility of both the nations to ensure that the competition does not veer into conflict. A 44-year-old firefighter has died while working on a wildfire near the southern Spanish resort of Estepona. The blaze started late on Wednesday evening and has since burned through around 5,000 acres of the densely forested area known as the Sierra Bermeja. Over 300 firefighters are working to extinguish the fire, which has yet to be brought under control. Several roads which run alongside the Mediterranean were closed because of the blaze. A total of 939 people have been evacuated from 4 communities in Estepona. Heavy rains in Venezuela caused the river Moron to overflow. Homes in the northern part of the country were swept in the rushing water. According to local officials, over 2,300 families were affected by the floods. No deaths or injuries were reported. The water level of the Moron River had come down later on Thursday evening, following which residents came out on the streets and started the cleanup operation. Streets in the Mexican town of Tula have turned into rivers after days of heavy rain lashed the city and floodwaters swept through homes. According to the Mexican government, around 2,000 houses have been damaged due to the flood. Residents have lost everything in the disaster, with many local businesses in ruin. The Mexican president has urged residents at risk to seek shelters. Spanish police said that it had arrested the former head of Venezuela's military intelligence unit, Hugo Carvajal, who had been in hiding since a Spanish court approved his extradition to the US almost 2 years ago. The police did not give any further details of his arrest and just said that Carvajal was living totally isolated. World Today Desk, DD India.
The fifth and final cricket test in Manchester between India and England has been cancelled. This is in the wake of COVID-19 outbreak within the Indian team. So the BCCI and the ECB held several rounds of discussions to find a way to play the test match. However, the outbreak of COVID-19 in the Indian team contingent forced the decision of calling off the Old Trafford test match. The BCCI has offered the ECB a rescheduling of the cancelled test match. Both the boards will now work towards finding a window to reschedule this test match. India were leading the series 2-1 and this match was the final test in this series. But now it's thrown into doubt, the final test, because on Thursday, after the physiotherapist Yogesh Parmar had tested positive for coronavirus, India's head coach Ravi Shastri had also tested positive during the 4th test at the Oval and has since been isolating. And also the bowling coach Bharat Arun, the fielding coach R. Sridhar and the physio Nitin Patel. So it's all the support staff that have tested positive. The British teenager Emma Raducanu reached the US Open final as her meteoric rise continued with a stunning straight set win over the Greek 17th seed Maria Sakkari. This happened in New York. The 18-year-old extended her dream run and she won 6-1, 6-4, in which her dominance was almost beyond belief. She is the first qualifier to reach a Grand Slam final and will play another teenager, Leylah Fernandez, on Saturday. Raducanu is the first British woman in a major singles final in 44 years. Earlier, Canada's Leylah Fernandez defeated Aryna Sabalenka of Belarus in the first semi-final. Fernandez won the first set 7-6 and Sabalenka won the second set 6-4. So it went into a decider, which Leylah won 6-4 and reached the final. Maria Sakkari now will face Emma. That was in the second semi-final, which as we gave you the information that she has already won. Raducanu has already won that semi-final. Now, Lionel Messi scored a hat-trick to give Argentina a 3-0 win over Bolivia in the World Cup qualifier on Thursday, lifting him above Pelé as South America's top international scorer with 79 goals. Messi got the opener after 14 minutes in Buenos Aires, dancing around the Bolivian defense before curling the ball into the net just outside the box. And he made it 2-0 in the 64th minute after working a 1-2 with Lautaro Martinez and displaying superb footwork in a packed penalty box. Then completed the hat-trick with 2 minutes left, crashing home a rebound from close range. His 77th, 78th and 79th goals marked his 7th hat-trick for the national side and took him 2 above Pelé in the South American scoring charts. And there's more from the world of cricket. Let's take a look at our next report.
The Afghanistan Cricket Board named their selection on Thursday, 9 September, with the tournament a little over a month away. Star man Rashid Khan will spearhead the attack and has been joined by fellow all-rounders Mohammad Nabi and Sharafuddin Ashraf in the squad. Frontline spinners Qais Ahmed and Mujibur Rahman are also included in the Afghanistan roster for the tournament. The BCCI on Thursday received a complaint against former captain Mahendra Singh Dhoni's appointment as the Indian team's mentor for the T20 World Cup, citing the conflict of interest clause in the Lodha Committee reforms. Former Madhya Pradesh Cricket Association life member Sanjeev Gupta, who has previously filed a series of conflict of interest complaints against players and administrators, has sent a letter to the Apex Council members that Dhoni's appointment is a violation of the conflict of interest clause, under which one person cannot hold 2 posts. The Indian cricket team will go on a tour of South Africa later this year. The tour has been confirmed by the South African Cricket Board. Under this, the team will go to India in December 2021 and this tour will end in January 2022. India has to play 3 tests, 3 ODIs and 4 T20 matches here. The India-South Africa series will start from 26th December and will run till 25th of January. Test matches will be played first. This series will be part of the World Test Championship. The last series between India and South Africa was played in March 2020. This series took place in India, but the first match was washed away by rain and the remaining 2 matches had to be postponed after the coronavirus cases surfaced. Indian origin batsman Jaskaran Malhotra has repeated history by hitting 6 sixes in the same over in the ODI match between America and Papua New Guinea being played at the Al Emirates Cricket Ground in Oman. He has become the 2nd batsman in the world to achieve this record in ODI cricket. Prior to him, former South African opener Herschel Gibbs had set this record against the Netherlands in ICC Cricket World Cup 2007. Defending champions West Indies recalled veteran pacer Ravi Rampal for the first time since 2015 and left out 6-hitting star Carlos Braithwaite in their 15-member squad for the highly awaited ICC Men's T20 World Cup 2021. The 36-year-old Rampal is back in a West Indies T20 squad for the first time in 6 years. Meanwhile, Braithwaite, who made a name for himself by hitting 4 consecutive sixes off Ben Stokes, has not been picked up. T20 specialist Sunil Narayan has also not found a spot in the strong West Indies setup for the global T20 tournament. Sports Desk, DD India.
So let's turn the pages of history now and see what happened on this day across the world. Here's our segment called Today in History.
On this day in the year 1900, Galveston, Texas was struck by a Category 4 hurricane that killed an estimated 8,000 people. Also known as the Great Galveston Hurricane of 1900, the storm remains one of the deadliest natural disasters to hit the US in history. On the 10th of September 1963, American Express, one of the world's largest banking houses, opened a credit card division in Britain. In the year 1973, on this day, bombing attacks launched by the Irish Republican Army targeted 2 mainline railway stations in central London that left 13 people injured and caused large-scale damage. It was on this day in the year 1981, Spanish artist Pablo Picasso's monumental war painting, Guernica, was returned to Spain from New York's Museum of Modern Art after 4 decades. Picasso had vowed it would not enter Spain until democracy was restored there. On this day in 2002, Switzerland became the 190th member of the United Nations, pledging to respect its traditional neutrality while pursuing human rights, world peace, and struggle against poverty. On this day in the year 2005, Grammy Award-winning singer and guitarist Clarence Gatemouth Brown died in Texas at the age of 81. It was on this day in the 10th of September 2008 when scientists at the European Organization for Nuclear Research started up the Large Hadron Collider, the world's largest and highest particle smashing machine.
And that's all we have for you in World Today today. Thank you very much for watching. Namaskar.